even though he was held in captivity for 2.5 days by the Dallas police, they said that they kept no notes of what he said. He was interrogated several times, but they kept no notes, and they had no tape recording, made no tape recording. So in other words, we don't really know what he said. All we know is what the authorities told us he said. All right? But they asked him, Captain Fritz, and this is in Appendix 11 of the Warren Commission report. Captain Fritz, who headed the homicide investigation in Dallas, said, "Where were you at the time of the shooting?" He said, "I was in the downstairs lunchroom of the school book depository." He said, "Was there anybody else in there with you?" He said, "Yeah. There was 2 colored boys," what they called them in those days. And he said, one of them, his name is Junior, and he said the other's a short, stocky guy, and I'm not sure his name. Well, Junior Jarman and Harold Norman were indeed in the downstairs lunchroom just prior to the arrival of the motorcade. Now, my question, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is how could Oswald have correctly identified these 2 guys in the downstairs lunchroom if he's up on the 6th floor shooting at the president? Okay? So then there was a Dallas policeman who was on a 3-wheel motorcycle, and he was riding in the motorcade, and he hears shots, and he sees pigeons rise off the roof of the school book depository building. So his immediate thought was maybe there was a sniper on the roof of the depository building. So he guns his motorcycle, races up to the front of the building, jumps off, runs inside, immediately encounters Roy Truly, the building superintendent, and said, "I need to get to the roof." So they go over and try the elevators, but the elevators are all open on the 5th floor, and the elevators aren't operating. Okay, somebody left the gates open. So they start racing up the stairs. He gets to the 2nd floor where there's a lunchroom there, and he sees a guy stand there holding a Coca-Cola or a soft drink in his hand, calmly, coolly, and he runs in and points a gun at him. And Truly said, "That's okay. He works here. That's Lee Oswald." And the Warren Commission thoughtfully even gave us a time frame. 1.5 minutes after the shooting, the policeman and Truly encounter Oswald down on the 2nd floor, almost the ground floor.
Drinking a Coke.
With a Coke bottle in his hand, calm, cool, and collected. On the opposite side, yet, so we're expected to believe, because Oswald was supposedly shooting from the southeast corner of the school book depository, and yet he, according to the official story, he ran clear to the northwest corner of the book depository building, stashed the rifle behind some boxes, and then ran back down the other way and got on the stairs, which had heavy fire doors on every landing, crashed through these fire doors, ran down, 5 flights of steps to get to the lunchroom, got in there, fumbled for change, put change in the machine, got a Coke out of the machine, and was standing there calm, cool, and collected when Truly and the policeman came in. But see, you never get told these things. No, you never get told these things.
No.
So Oswald leaves the depository, and so then, interestingly enough, he says, as he was leaving the book depository building, a young man in a suit and tie and a coat ran up to him, showed him a book of identification, that was his words, said he was with the Secret Service and wanted to know where the nearest telephone was. Okay, now here's Oswald, who supposedly has just shot the President of the United States. He's trying to make his getaway, and who we're told less than an hour later shoots down a policeman on the streets of South Dallas, and he directs the guy to the telephone, and actually said he stood there to make sure the guy got to the telephone.
Jeez.
Now, wait a minute. Okay, so he leaves the book depository, and the next thing we know, there's even controversy of how he got back to his room in the house, but I won't bore you with that. But right about 1 o'clock, he gets to his room in the house, and he hustles in. His landlady is sitting there watching the TV about how there's been a shooting in the motorcade. They hadn't even announced Kennedy was dead yet. Oswald doesn't say anything. He just hustles back to his little room. And about that time, she hears a horn toot, beep, beep. And she looks out front, and there's a Dallas police car out front. And she's not sure what it was, but she recalls there was the number 1 and the number 0. Well, car 10 is the number of the car that Tippett was in.
J.D. was in car 10?
Okay. So then, about that time, the cop car, after tooting the horn, slides on down. His rooming house was like the second house from the corner on Zang's. So the cop car kind of slowly pulls down and then makes the corner on Zang's. just as Oswald comes hustling back out of his room with his jacket on, doesn't say a word, hustles out the door, turns towards Zhang's. She looks out the window, sees him heading towards Zhang's, and goes back to watching television. Well, supposedly, according to the official version, he ran or walked all the way from this Beckley Street boarding house, umpteen blocks, to the Texas Theater. And yet, let me assure you, this was a Friday afternoon. This was pre-air conditioning. It was Indian summer. It was actually a really beautiful day after the storm kind of cleared away that morning. And people were all out on the stoops and on the lawns, and there was excitement in the air. It was Texas Football Friday, and the president had been in town, and some people were beginning to hear that there had been a shooting in the motorcade. People were out and about. This is like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And they have never found not even one person who says, oh, I saw a guy run up the street, or I saw Oswald and he was moving towards the theater. It didn't happen. I maintain he went around the corner on Zhang's, got in J.D. Tippett's police car, and Tippett drove him to the theater and let him out, where he arrived shortly after 1 p.m., bought a ticket, went in, sat over near Jack Davis, I think trying to make an intelligence contact, failed to make contact, gets up, goes out, buys popcorn from Butch Burroughs. Again, no more than 10 minutes after 1. The show had just started, and after the newsreels and the coming attractions, that would have made it about 1:10. Goes back in, and then goes over and sits in the center section, third row, third seat. And so there he sits, munching his popcorn, I guess. Meanwhile, Tippett pulls up the street across catty corner from the Texas Theater and stops at the record store and goes in to make a phone call. Now, he's been in there on a regular basis. He knows them. They know him. But he goes in there. Something's on his mind. He doesn't say anything to anybody. He just rushes to the telephone, tried to dial a number. He wasn't there very long and apparently did not reach whoever he's trying to reach. Slammed down the phone, ran out, jumped back in his car. And we know this happened because right at this time, about 1 o'clock, is when the Dallas police dispatcher tried to radio Tippett in his squad car and got no answer. So he's out of his car. Well, he's at the record store. So he goes back, didn't make a phone call, and jumped his car. He takes off and he turns and makes a U-turn and is heading up 10th Street. And then he's heading up and he gets past Patton Street, and he's on a direct line within a few blocks of Jack Ruby's apartment. But apparently he sees somebody walking down the street. Somebody hails him. So he pulls over, and at this point it's like about 1:15, between 1:10 and 1:15. He pulls over to the right-hand curb. The window on his squad car is up, and something was said with the guy outside. And whatever it wasn't the right thing, because Tippett gets out of his squad car and pulls his gun, okay, and starts to walk around the left front fender of the car when somebody over here on the street side shoots him. First bullet hits him in the heart, and he's dead when he hits the ground with his gun out of the holster lying under the body, which means he had pulled his gun, right? Okay, then, according to the House committee, whoever shot Tippett, this was not simply to get away from a cop, because if you do that, you shoot, the cop falls down, what do? You run like hell. No, whoever shot Tippett in the heart then walks over and puts a coup de grace in his head at a close range. Whoever shot Tippett wanted Tippett dead, okay? And then they leave, and and then they unload their gun, leave these shell casings lying at the scene. That's a real smart crook. And then people are starting to come out and look around and wonder, so that whoever shot Tippett takes off running in the general direction of the Texas Theater. And so, but he doesn't get there. Actually, in fact, at the last word was he had entered a church there, okay? And so they called all the cops, and they were getting ready to converge on this church when a Johnny Brewer, a shoe salesman at a shoe store on about a few stores up from the Texas Theater, heard sirens, looked out front, saw a guy, young white guy, duck into the alcove of his store, acted like he was hiding from the cops, acting suspicious. The cop car screeches on by. This guy turns and starts walking up towards the Texas Theater. Brewer, who ducked back into the shoe store, I think probably got back in there and hollered, "Hey, watch the store," and then went back out and was going to follow this guy, see where he's going. But when he came back out on the sidewalk, looked down at the Texas Theater, there was nobody there. So he goes down to the Texas Theater and asks Julia Postal, the ticket seller, says, "Hey, did anybody just buy a ticket and go in the theater?" And she said, "No." He said, "Well, then I think somebody just sneaked in the theater." All right. Now we go to Butch Burroughs, same time period, right about 1:30. There were two double doors, one for the outside and then a little foyer and then to the inside lobby. And oddly enough, between the two doors are stairs that lead to the balcony. So he hears the outer doors open at about 1:30, and he walks around the counter to take the ticket of whoever's coming in, but nobody comes in the inner doors. So about that time, Julia Postal and Brewer, the shoe store salesman, they come in and said, "Hey, did somebody just come in here?" He said, "Well, I heard the doors open, but nobody came in through the inner door." Said he must be in the balcony. So he said, "Well, call the cops." So they called the cops. All right, now here's the President of the United States has been assassinated in their town. One of their own police officers has been shot several blocks away. And they get a call at the dispatcher to say that somebody sneaked in the theater without buying a ticket. And on the basis of that, they rush 15 squad cars, district attorneys, and county sheriffs, and even men claiming to be CIA, and they all surround the Texas Theater. And so they go in, and they take Johnny Brewer. And picture this, here's a theater that holds 900 people, and there's only about 20 people in it, scattered all around. They turn on the house lights, but the movie's still running. They walk down, they get on the stage, Brewer's up there with them. They're saying, "Do you see the guy that slipped in?" He looks around, spots somebody back at the back, and says, "I think that's him back there." Now, what do you think they do then? They go rush back, grab the guy, right? Nope, they didn't do that. They started working their way back each aisle. "Excuse me, sir, stand up, come around here, let's see some ID." And they just keep working their way back towards the back of the theater, giving Oswald every opportunity to make a run for it. And I think the plan was they're going to shoot him trying to escape, and then it's all wrapped up.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay? Except when and the cops that were in on it and ready to shoot him, it got fouled up because Officer McDonald showed up, and I don't think he was part of the plot. He just showed up, and he goes up there, and he's the first one to approach Oswald. And he said, Oswald said, "Well, it's all over now," or something like that, stood up and pulled this .38 pistol from his belt, and McDonald said he heard the gun snap. Okay, as he held it against his midriff. And this was all told to the Associated Press and was published the next day. All right, and McDonald said he heard the gun snap, and he thought, "Oh my God, am I lucky, that it didn't go off." And so at this time, several of them jump on Oswald, and they haul him out the front door of the
gun misfired?
Theater. This supposedly is the pistol he has just used to kill Officer J.D. Tippit, right? Well, when the FBI got it, they wanted to try to test it, check the ballistics. They found it had a bent firing pin. That's why it wouldn't go off. So they grab Oswald and they haul him out the front door where a crowd had gathered, and there are all kinds of photographs of them hauling Oswald out of the theater, and they put him in a squad car and they head for town. This would have been about 1:40, 1:45. Okay? Meanwhile, Bernard Hare, who had the hobby store next to the theater, said he told me he heard the commotion, went out, stood at the edge of the crowd to see what was going on, and we have a photograph of him standing in the crowd. And then he said, but he couldn't see anything much, so he went back in his store and walked through and went back into the alleyway in the back, and he said there were police cars lined up all down the alleyway, and as he walked a few feet towards the Texas Theater, he saw the back door of the Texas Theater slam open, and these cops were dragging out a young, slender white guy, okay, that looks like he'd been in a fight, and they hustled him around and threw him in a squad car, and they took off for town. And for all the years until I talked to him, Hare had believed he saw the arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald, because he heard he was arrested at the theater and hauled out, and he didn't pay much more attention to it. And when I showed him the pictures of him bringing Oswald out the front of the theater, he asked the $64,000 question. He said, well, then who did I see getting brought out the rear of the Texas theater? So see, there's something else going on there. Somebody led the cops to the Texas theater, went in the balcony, and I have 2 Dallas arrest reports, 2 separate ones, that both say that the suspect was arrested in the balcony of the Texas theater.
I seem to remember hearing that.
Yeah,
somewhere.
No, he was arrested on the ground floor. The guy that took out the back door was arrested in the balcony.
How well thought out was the grab of Oswald in the Texas theater, or was it just a convenient development that fell into their hands?
No. It was all planned. But I think he was picked up by J.T. Tippett. I think he was driven to the theater where he thought he was going to make some kind of intelligence contact. Because I've already mentioned how he came and sat down next to the kid and didn't say anything, probably waiting for him to say the spring came early this year. And he was supposed to say, yes, but the ducks are flying south, or whatever, Now, here's another little tidbit. I know you don't know this, but this is another tidbit that convinces me that he was working in some kind of intelligence op. When Oswald was arrested, he had some very unusual things on him. He had a little piece of paper that listed all of his schools he'd gone to and the Army bases he'd been stationed.
Well, we never leave home without that.
Now, wait a minute. I know what schools I went to. I know what military bases I was assigned to. Why has he got that? He also had a top from a Cox's department store box. Not the box, just a top. Okay? And I forget now, there's 2 or 3 other little items that just didn't make any sense, Well, wait a minute. If you know spycraft, you know that when you meet your intelligence contacts and you give the password, the moon is blue tonight, well, then you also have to show your bona fides or your bona fides, okay, which is little nondescript things that you would have on you, so if you're arrested, doesn't make any sense, doesn't arouse any suspicion, but you can show those, and they know that you're the person that they are scheduled to meet. While we're talking about assassination minutia, although it's not really minutia, these are actually very vital facts, I'd like to direct your attention to Oswald's weapon, okay, the 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano, a piece of Italian war rifle that during World War II the Italians dubbed the humane weapon because it was notoriously inaccurate. You couldn't kill anybody with it. But right there in the Warren Commission is the testimony of Ronald Simmons, who then was chief of the Weapons Evaluation Branch of the Ballistics Research Laboratory of the Department of the U.S. Army. And he tells them they could not sight the weapon in using the telescope. An attempt was made to sight it in using the iron sight. They had to adjust the sight with the addition of 2 metal shims. Okay? And then a page or so later, Commission Exhibits 576, 577, and 578, he corrected himself and said, well, actually, we had to put 3 metal shims under the telescopic sight to make it accurate enough to test. And they actually show us pictures of the little metal shims they had to put under the telescopic sight to make it accurate enough just to test. And we're told that he managed to squeeze off 3 shots in 6 seconds and hit 2 out of the 3 of the shots. Come on.
It's absurd.
But now, the truth of the matter, if Oswald was in the downstairs, if Oswald did not fire a rifle that day, keep in mind that right after he arrived at police headquarters, they put paraffin on his hands, paraffin on his face to test for gunpowder and nitrates. They found traces of nitrates on his hands, which is basically meaningless because by all accounts he was spent that morning moving around boxes of school books which had printing ink all over them, and
Right.
printing ink would give you nitrates. But there was no gunpowder on his hands. And, interestingly enough, no gunpowder or nitrates on his cheek. Well, now, the only way you're going to fire a bolt-action rifle, 3 shots in 6 seconds, which the FBI said it takes 2 seconds just to cock the bolt, pull the trigger, never mind trying to aim, is to hold it up close to your shoulder, sight down the sight, just like you see people doing with a rifle, and then pull the bolt back as you fire. Well, if he had done that, his right cheek would have been just perforated with nitrates and gunpowder.
Blown right into the pores, no way to hide it.
No way to hide it.
You can't even wash it out easily.
So, but if all that is taken into consideration, and you look at the full facts of the matter, if indeed the informant that stopped the assassination attempt in Chicago was Lee, and if that was Lee Harvey Oswald, and if he indeed was involved in the plot but tried to stop it with a telegram warning that Kennedy was going to be killed, he very possibly was not the heel in the assassination. He was the hero. He tried to stop it.